Good morning, everybody. This is Nadia from MLC CAD Systems. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful day. A little bit odd for me to be speaking out to the ether. I see that there's a lot of my customers and people that I've talked to before joining us. So today we're going to go over PDM Professional. And most of the functions I'll actually be covering today will also be in PDM Standard. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about the differentiating on those two types of products. But today is all about taking a look at the interface and figuring out what exactly this product is and how this product is going to help me. So I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to go through. I'm going to show you some live demonstrations as well. I'll probably take about half an hour or so. And then if you have any questions, feel free to just raise your hand or ask a question in the GoToWebinar application that you see on your desktop.
Muted.
All the information they're looking forward to. So let's just go ahead and get started. Inside PDM Professional, the first thing that we need to talk about is what is PDM Professional? What is it going to do for me? How is it going to use? And will it possibly improve my work? So at the very core of what PDM Professional is that it is a vaulting system for your engineering files. A lot of times, if you don't have a vault system or a management system, you just put them on your network drive. So you can imagine that PDM Professional is going to take the place of that network drive where you store all of your engineering files. Now, why would we not want it in our network drive? Well, when you open up files over a network drive, you actually have to break up your file in tons of little packets. It communicates over your network connection, and it opens it up on your SOLIDWORKS on your local side, and you're able to work with it. Now, unfortunately, as it's breaking up your file into all these little packets, sometimes if your network connection is not stable, it can drop some packets. And that's what we classically refer to as a corrupt file. If you've ever opened up a file in SOLIDWORKS from the network and it says, cannot open up the file, please contact your technical support, that's probably what's going on here. And so even though it's a vault system that's hosting all your files, what it actually does silently in the background is it actually copies them locally, so you're leveraging all the wonderful capabilities of the hardware that you have. If you invest a lot of financial resources into your hardware, you want to make sure that you're using it as its fullest potential. Again, a computer can only run as fast as its slowest component. So if that's your network communication, we really want to sort of eliminate that as a factor when you're working in SOLIDWORKS. Now, hopefully throughout this presentation, you'll see exactly how easy it is, and I will be happy to show you some functions that will improve your work. So the real reason why people look at PDM first is, again, this sort of scenario here that you can see in my PowerPoint. You have files all over the place. So while a lot of companies are disciplined to put all their files on a network drive, you might have some users that have some locally. They might put them in the wrong folder in the network drive. They might put it on a different drive. And so finding those files can be very challenging. Also, if users are hosting their files locally and they're not sharing them on the network drive, other users who are trying to leverage the content they've created are unable to do so. So that can be really devastating to efficiency. If you can't find a file, what do? You simply recreate it. Sometimes it's actually faster to recreate a file that you cannot find than it is to find the file. And in those situations, you're in a situation where basically you're duplicating work. So now you have files that have the same geometry, maybe different names that are out there that can cause some disruption, make things a little bit more complex for everybody else. So you really want to talk about, how much time are you spending looking for files? How much time are you spending recreating files? Or having redundant paperwork? How much time is this actually costing you? And so there's a lot of surveys out there, but the average that I've talked to, insofar as my customers and the people that I talk to on a day-to-day basis, they spend about 25% of their time merely just looking files. That's 25% of their time that they could be doing modeling work or other work. So this is time cost is what we want to try to save you. So we're going to cover 5 main topics today on the everyday use of PDM Professional. So we're going to first talk about the interface. What does the average user see, and how easy is it for them to be able to get into this? Then we'll talk about workflow, which is an advanced functionality that will allow you to ensure that your files go through the process they need to. We'll talk about version control, searching, and bombs. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the interface. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and minimize this and show you the interface of the vault. So you're looking here at my E drive, and my vault is actually this little blueberry right here. It looks just like a folder on my Windows, except for it has a different icon. When I double click on it, it's going to ask me for some credentials. I'll punch them in. And here's my vault. This is what every user who's a participant in the vault will see. This could include CAD users as well as non-CAD users as well. The great thing about this is that you can control non-CAD users such as sales, purchasing, inventory control, manufacturing, etc. to access this as well, but also make sure that they're not seeing what they're not supposed to see and they're not changing what they're not supposed to be changing. So, but the great thing about this is if you look here, this looks just like Windows interface. There's a little bit more information here, but there's some great stuff. So let's go find a SOLIDWORKS file. So I'm going to come here and look at my SOLIDWORKS file. And out the gate, you're going to see that I actually have a data card. So this data card right here on the bottom part of my interface gives me a lot of information about the file without actually opening the file up. This is a lot of information as well that engineers or SOLIDWORKS users don't include in their files because it doesn't benefit them on the modeling side. But this is valuable information to have company-wide. So we'll be able to take that 10,000-foot level and make sure all the data that's associated with that file is actually there. That's the use of the data card. We also have a preview tab here, which will let me look at the file itself. Now this is fantastic, but what's great is that if I click in here, I can actually leverage e-drawings, and I can actually come in here and look at the model. Now this has the full capabilities of e-drawings. I have the ability to mark it up. I have the ability to measure. And this is really fantastic. So imagine engineers, the ability to share their files with non-engineer users, aka manufacturing, and they have the ability to evaluate that model on their own without SOLIDWORKS. That's a huge benefit, not having to have SOLIDWORKS. So they can still go in and measure and evaluate this model without having to install a big engineering program. And that's a great thing about this. We have version, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Bill of materials. We have a contains tab, which is really managing the references of SOLIDWORKS. This is a part file, so it doesn't actually host any files within it. But if I go to the where used, this would actually show me the drawings and the assemblies that this file is in. So this is really fantastic. Basically, we have a lot of information about our data with a minimal interface. If you couldn't tell before, that interface, because it's Windows-based, allows a very, very short learning curve. You don't have to train the end users for weeks and weeks on end to be able to use this vault. Most of them are going to naturally take to them as they're very accustomed to a Windows interface. Now let's talk about workflow. I'm going to show you an example of a workflow here. So the idea of workflow is that your files go through a process within your company. And users, you rely on user discipline to know what needs to happen with that file. And they progress the file as it needs to. And eventually files get distributed to customers, to manufacturers, etc. As appropriate. But you're really relying on user discipline. In PDM, we have the ability to enforce this process. So if you'll see here, this is a very common workflow for engineering files. Initially, files will come in under this box called editing state. Now these boxes, I'm going to refer to them as states. And these arrows here, I'm going to refer to as transitions. These are pathways between states. So here in the first state under editing, I have the ability to allow users to check it out, check it in, make changes, to do whatever they want to that file, because that's appropriate when the file is under editing. And you can see those two arrows, two transitions coming out of this box that says submit for approval, that would sit in a waiting for approval state, or I have an arrow that says no approval required and goes to the approved states. Now the beauty about these transitions is I can dynamically make sure, I can dynamically manage the permissions to those states. So if a user has permissions for this submit for approval, they will see it, and I will show you how the user will access it. If they don't have permission to a specific transition, for example, maybe not every engineer can just bypass the waiting for approval and go to no approval required. They simply won't see it that it's available to them. So this transition may have a very particular subset of users that actually have access to it. And then when it hits this waiting for approval state, maybe I allow the users, every user to see it, but maybe not necessarily edit it. For example, we don't necessarily want to edit files as they're waiting for approval. That feels appropriate. And so somebody can look at it here and they can either pass it on to approval, or they can say it needs more changes to it. So the file can kind of go through here as many times as they want, and then eventually it will get to the approved state. This bottom part of the workflow is just very, very similar. So the idea of this is that now you have a system in place to make sure that your process is being followed, that no steps are skipped. This workflow can be as complicated or as simple as you'd like it to be. You can also have multiple workflows for multiple types of files. But let's see what the end user does. So when I take a look at this file right here, I can see that this particular component is in the under editing state. So all files have a state associated to them. If I want to change the state, the end user will come here, right click, and they'll get an option to change state. And they will see access to all the transitions that are available to them from that state. So I'm an admin, I have the ability to submit this file for approval, or I can even bump it to the no approval required. Now what's great about this is when I submit this for approval, nothing happens to the file except for its change of state. I can have the ability to make a comment, and then I can put a notification comment as well. When I click OK here, you're going to see that this file went from under editing to waiting on approval. Now, let's say it's appropriate for me to approve this file. And I want you to take a quick peek here and see that the file is at Rev A. If I come here and right-click, change state, you can see that I have two new transitions available. I can either kick it back to under editing using the editing required transition, or I can say it's past approval and submit it to the approved state. When I pass the approval, I'm going to put a notification, and then I'll say for the machine shop, and I'm going to click OK. Now, it's hit the approved state, but I want you to also notice that this file has also been bumped in Rev. So through those transitions that I showed you in the workflow, I do have the ability to automate certain tasks, write signatures, bump the revision, add data, take away a watermark. Lots of different functions are available in those transitions. So really the idea of this workflow is that I'm able to enforce my procedures, and I don't have to rely on my engineers or any of my employees to remember a very complicated workflow. They don't need to remember who needs to approve it, when, and how. My workflow will actually help me enforce that. And this will give me the ability to stay very, very consistent. Let's talk about version control. So we want to know who did what when. And what does version control mean? Version is a little bit different than revisions. So you can see here on this file that I have a Rev B, but I also have 4 versions of this file. Let's take a quick peek at this file's history. So here you can see that I initially created this file, or a user by the name of Nadia created this file on November 30th, and that they submitted through transitions, and it's actually gotten some different versions. Let me go ahead and show you how to create a version on the fly. So we're going to take this part, and we're going to put it back in an editing required state, because that's the state I have the ability to check it out. So I'm simply just going to double click it and open this up in SOLIDWORKS. What we're going to see is that I'm going to make a change to this file, and I'm going to create a new version. Versions are independent of revisions. You can have as many versions as you would like. So it's asking me if I'd like to check out the file, and I'll say, yes, I would like to check out this file. And let's just go ahead and make a pretty significant change. So we're going to just create a sketch. And let's just put a hole in this. We'll make this pretty obvious. Now that I have this hole in, I can actually take this file and check it in. And I'm using the PDM add-in that's inside SOLIDWORKS natively. So when I check it in, SOLIDWORKS and PDM are going to recognize I've actually changed the geometry of this file and actually create a new version. Now, when the file is checked in, you'll see that I no longer have ownership of it, and SOLIDWORKS is smart enough to recognize that, and it'll say read only. Now, the great thing about this is that now I'm at version 5, but I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, maybe I really didn't want a gigantic hole in this. I can actually look at my version history and go back to a previous version where it didn't have a hole in it. And I can actually go back and get all the older versions that I like at any given time to make sure I'm looking at the design that I want. Now, how is this useful for engineers? Imagine when you're working on a part and you come to a fork in the design road. You're looking at something, you're like, I could sweep this or I could loft this. Well, you decide to go, if you check it in before you proceed and you decide to go sweep, then you're creating versions there. Then if you decide, oh, maybe I should have lofted that, you can go back to a previous version before you made the sweep and actually continue working on with the loft. What is great about this is you don't actually have to delete the features. You can go back to a previous time and spot of your design. Now, if I don't want an older version, notice that my interface is being very clear about having an older version. I can simply just get the latest. There's my version 5, and there's the one with the hole in it. So that's a very fast and easy way to make a version. Any change to a file, as it's checked in, will create a version. And it will allow you to be very dynamic about what's actually going on with that file. What's great for this as users, what the capability is, imagine, again, this network drive, is that if you're working in a network drive, you're simply overwriting your work at all times. And there's never the capability to go back to an older version. PDM is going to give you that. And again, this history is going to let you know who did what when. And it's very important when you have a large engineering groups and multiple people are touching multiple files at all times. Searching. Let's talk about search, because this is actually quite a big one. We don't want to spend any time looking for files. Now, at the core of PDM Professional, we actually have a SQL database controlling all the metadata and controlling the versions and revisions and workflows. Now, the beauty of this is that SQL allows for very, very fast searching. So let me show you an example of that. In the upper right-hand corner of my Vault view, I have a complete search tool. This complete search tool allows me to navigate any folder I want and the subfolders that I'm looking in my Vault. You can see that I can search by name, description, number. I have some options here below. I can also use data cards to look at files. So you can see here that of all the different file types that I have, I can access their data card and search there. I can search for files that are checked out by certain users. And as an engineering manager, what's really great is I can search for files in very specific states. So one of the things I may do is, as an engineering manager, is I might come in and I might create a custom search where I am looking for all files waiting on approval. And what's great about this is that this is basically my to-do list. So if I search my Vault for all files waiting on approval, see how fast it was able to get me that list. I can see which folder they're in. I can see what state, what computer they were last checked in on. I can see their file size. And here, when I select the files, I do have full access to the data card, the preview, the version information that I did in my regular Vault view. So I can make sure that I can just go down this line and make sure I'm looking at the files that I need to and that they are what they need to be. And what's great about this is if I do this, I can sit here and actually, from this interface directly, just right-click, change state, and approve them if I need to. Another great trick for the search tool, let me go in and clear this out, is if I type in, for example, a letter. So I'm going to go back to my root vault, and I'm going to just type in the letter Q. What's really powerful about this is that this search card assumes a wildcard before and after the search criteria. So when I just type in the letter Q, it's going in and finding all the files that have the letter Q in the file name. And again, you can see how fast it is to give me that result. So even something as odd as W will actually give me quite a fast result. It's looking for drawing files, part files, etc. It's much, much faster than the search tool that you're normally accustomed to in Windows. You can see it's pretty much picking all my drawings because they all have the letter W in it. So basically, we get the files at our fingertips very, very quickly. If your file's in the Vault, you'll be able to search through them through whatever criteria that you like, process, different variable information, or file names, and be able to get that data to yourselves very, very quickly. The last thing we're going to look at is bombs, and this is very particular to PDM. So unlike other data management systems that don't understand CAD. It is very important that we understand our CAD file references and how they actually operate. So it's important that we are able to look at this information. So let's take a look at our vault at a assembly. So I'm going to take a look at this yoke cylinder assembly, and you can see that I have a bill of materials right here. And this yoke has 2 versions. I can tell at a quick glance just by looking at the version tab. And here's my bill of materials. This yoke has been approved and is version A. Now, the bill of materials allows me to actually save them out if I need to. This inventory BOM is just the ability for me to change the columns of these BOMs. And this is very powerful because different users within my company need different data about my BOMs. For example, my purchasers will want to know the count and the cost, whereas my engineers will want to know the configuration and the state. So you have the ability to create custom BOMs, which are different columns. You can have your BOM be indented, parts only, or top level, just as you are used to in SOLIDWORKS. I can hide this tree right here. I can take this BOM and do it as built or latest. And what that's really referring to is my assembly pulling the references of the part files as it was built? So for example, my assembly might be using an older version of a file, or is it just going to go ahead and pull the latest? And that's dynamically available to you as needed. And you can also access the configurations of your assembly and versions. Now what's great here is that you can come over here and you can open up your BOM as a CSV file. Essentially it's an Excel file, and you can actually distribute this out elsewhere. PDM Professional also has the ability to automatically export this information as XML if you want to deliver it to an ERP system, SAP, PLM, any other organization-wide level system. You have the ability to search within your BOM, and you have the ability to compare BOMs. This is one of my favorite functions right here, is comparing. So if I were to click compare, it's going to compare the latest version of my assembly, and here I'm going to compare it to version 1. And what I want you to notice is that there's a very subtle highlight here of orange, and there's a legend in the bottom right-hand corner where it's going to show me parts that are new, parts that are modified, and parts that are deleted. And what this is telling me is that it's actually pulling a different version of files in version 1 of the assembly versus version 2 of the assembly. If I look at my plunger assembly, and let's just go ahead and get the latest of that very quickly, and let's compare it as well. I'm going to compare this with version 1, and again, different types of part files. But again, this is very, very powerful because at the end of the day, you don't have to sit there with 2 Excel spreadsheets and sort of, just manually compare them. We have a tool out of the box that will allow you to do that. And you can see that's pulling different revisions of files. So this is very, very powerful. So out the gate, the everyday use of PDM Professional for end users is that you have a very easy to use interface. Users don't have to worry about enforcing the internal processes. Basically changing the state of a file is almost like taking it off of your desk and putting it in your outbox. You don't have to make sure that a piece of paper doesn't fall off someone's desk, that someone receives an email. You can be confident as a user that when you submit it for waiting on approval, that the next person is going to be able to pick that up as they need to. Version control is really powerful for SOLIDWORKS users as they're able to pull the older versions of files and be able to reuse design as they need. Again, with the search, you're not going to lose any information. You'll be, even if you were to, this is a great example, sometimes when you're working in a network drive, you accidentally left click and drag a folder by accident and you actually dump a folder somewhere and you don't know where you dropped it. And so again, the search tool is really going to be able to sidestep that problem and help you find your files whenever you need to. Also, the BOMs are fantastic. Comparing BOMs is a great utility for your SOLIDWORKS users, but another great function or great benefit for the BOMs is that your CAD information is accessible for non-CAD users. So again, creating that inventory BOM so that my purchasers are able to grab the information they need and make the appropriate purchases. So you're not wasting money on parts that you don't actually need. So hopefully the idea of PDM is that will help you streamline your organization. It will allow you to communicate effectively. Again, instead of sending emails with PDFs attached of this one version and that version is on the network drive, and this other customer has a different version of it. Everything is in one monolithic, concise place for you to be able to find it. The workflow is going to help you maintain accountability. So again, this is not to be punitive, but it's important to understand who made the change when, so that if you need to ask further questions, you can approach the right person about this. And again, saving that time on searching, not having to recreate files, finding files, that time saving will translate into money. So my silly Mimi of the day is that this value is priceless. It's really, really going to help you out.